Legislative coffee of this season, and we are so happy to have our representatives here, Carrie Barth, Rebecca Schmoy. I don't know if Karen Tyson will be here. Hopefully she'll be here. Okay, all right. And I'm your moderator today. My name is Daryl McCune, and we will have Lewis Reed here to hand the microphone around to you guys. Remember that you want to use the microphone to ask your questions, since this is being broadcast live on Facebook and will be posted on the Government Access channel. For the questions, just ask one question per person at a time. Hold your applause to allow for additional questions. You can ask questions, but try to not make statements. Try to make it a question that they can answer. Make sure your cell phones are turned off today. I would like to thank our sponsors, the Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce and the Legislative Action Committee, Franklin County Farm Bureau Association, AT&T. Our platinum sponsors are Price Chopper, Calmore of Ottawa, Advent Health Ottawa, Kansas State Bank, and Ottawa University. Okay. We also want to thank the City of Ottawa for providing this facility and for filming today. The opening question that I have for you ladies today basically is, what legislative bill that you voted for were you the most proud of to support, and why? And let's start with Rebecca Schmoy.
I would say that mine was the Born Alive. When we're talking about individual rights, when we're talking about the sanctity of life, once a human being has been born, they have those individual liberties, they have those rights endowed. So the fact that I was able to not only stand up for the life that this child has, but we were also able to give parents the opportunity to see their child be treated like a human being, that means a lot to me. I believe that life happens at conception. I believe that God formed us together and knit us in the womb. I believe that when that child is on a table and struggling either to live or struggling through the process of dying, that it should be treated as a valuable human life. And so Born Alive was probably the most emotional one to watch, debated on the floor, and I get emotional thinking about the fact that as human beings, as decent people with a moral standard, we treat other individuals with the same care that we would expect to be treated with. And so that by far outweighed any of the rest of them for me.
Good morning, everyone. It's a good day today. We've got, we're lucky to be here today. It's Kentucky Derby Day, so therefore the hat. I had a lot of favorite pieces of legislation this year. I actually think we accomplished a great deal this year of things that were some priorities to me. There's some things that we didn't do, and we can probably talk about that later as well, that I really had hoped that we would have done that would have helped everyone. One of the favorite pieces I had was actually on the final day. So last Friday was the final day of session, and we went until just after 9 p.m. at night when we finished. And kind of at the final hour, we actually got to hear what I call a health freedom bill. When I decided to run 3 years ago, the closures of schools, how individual freedoms and rights were being stripped away from us left and right, and it impacted my kids and my family and didn't offer us what I would call a choice. That was a huge impact on my life and our family's life, and I saw it impacting others, and I saw it causing mental health disruption to people. And Then we started having all of these rules around COVID, and I saw that our individual liberties, which are constitutionally protected, were being threatened, and that really lit a fire inside of me. And so that bill at the end was one that was able to reduce the Kansas Department of Health and Environment Secretary's authority to not be able to dictate tyranny and allow for individual freedom of choice. I think all of us are smart individuals and can make those types of choices for ourselves. So that was a piece of legislation that I was really excited. We did pass it in the House with 63 votes. It is not veto override proofed, so we don't have enough votes to override it. But it's something that was the first time that we actually got to have the discussion and debate. I would have loved to have had that bill, had an opportunity to have a hearing in committee. It should have gone through my Health and Human Services Committee. It did not, for multiple different reasons. And I'm losing my voice a little bit. I don't know why. Probably because I was screaming so much last weekend at the National Volleyball Tournament for my daughter in Ohio. Anyway, that is something that I hope that this year we will have the opportunity to have a hearing. There are multiple doctors, there are multiple experts across the board that are out there that we have made contacts with that I do plan to have be an advocate to get them to Kansas, to Topeka, to testify and to provide truth and data and expose a lot of the things that have happened that are not right in the last 3 years of data being suppressed. I don't know if you all just saw, but the CDC, Janet Walensky is her first name, or last name at least, just stepped down, which I think is a shame because I think she should have been fired for the lack of information that she was providing. And the fact that she actually admitted in an article about a year or so ago that she was purposely extracting and not giving us data that was out there and available. So these are just things that if we don't do something about them, we're going to continuously be the victim. And so these are things that I think we have to protect our rights on and something I stand strong for. So thank you.
Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Senator Joyce. Our question that we had this morning was, what legislative bill that you voted for were you the most proud to support and why?
Well, we work on many pieces of legislation. It's difficult to take it down to just one bill. I would say good morning to all of you thank you for being here, and thank you for our sponsors first. And I want to call out the tech guys. You may not realize how much work they put into stuff. That being my industry, I definitely know and appreciate. These guys are spot on and they do a lot of good work for us. So you guys know that fiscal is important to me. That's one of the main issues that I tend to focus on. We had an awesome tax bill this year, Senate Bill 169. It was as good as the one last year that my colleagues, they were not in the House last year. They weren't part of the problem. House leadership wouldn't run the bill. This year, we get to the end of session and the governor vetoes it. And then we have two legislators that have always voted for that type of legislation, and they flipped on us. They were apparently seen coming out of the governor's office, so we don't know what she said or what they said, but what was in the bill, just so you guys know, and people say have different sound bites on it, but one of the things that was close, near and dear to my heart was it eventually took Social Security to no state income tax. It would have eventually, it was a soft landing. It wasn't just removing it all at once. Right now you're at 75,000 exempt. This took it to 100,000 exempt, increased it by $5,000 every year, and it got rid of the cliff. So any of you that know, if you make that $75,001, you pay full state income tax on that cliff. It got rid of that. And so she vetoed it. It had a single rate income tax. I know some people think that that would harm the poor, but the way that we wrote this legislation, it did more good. It did more good for low income and medium income Kansans than any other population in the state. More people would have been helped by this legislation. And I can say that because it exempted the first $6,150 for an individual, $12,300 for family was completely exempt. You did not pay state income tax on it. and it took us to a single rate bracket. So the sound bites, don't believe the sound bites, that this hurt the poor and that it wasn't affordable. That is not true. Another piece of legislation that was in there, it would have been property tax relief for all homeowners. What we did last year on we took the 20,000 exemption K through 12 and increased it to 40K. This would have increased it to 60K. So 2 years in a row, you would have seen that increase. Governor vetoed it. There was a corporate tax cut in there, but the irony was people are saying, well, this helped the corporations out. Guess what? They get that tax cut anyway. That was passed into law in the Apex bill that the governor signed and others voted for. I did not support that legislation. It picked out 2 businesses and gave them $1 billion in tax relief. And it also took corporate income tax from a half cent down in 2024 and a half cent down in 2025. So in 169, it would just have accelerated that. And so it wasn't anything that they're not already going to get. So anybody that says it favored corporations, that's not true. One of the major pieces of legislation that this governor has said that she has fought over and over, you guys, the proof is in her actions. This is her 3rd bill to veto with food sales tax reductions. 3rd one. This one would have taken state sales tax on food, on groceries, to 0 in 2024 instead of it going to 0 January 1st, 2025. Next year it goes to 2% and the year after 0. It would have taken it to 0 in 2024. So the other thing that it did have in there, a provision for banks. Banks weren't included in the corporate income tax, and so it just included them to get the same half percent that they would have gotten it in 2024, 2025. So it's really disappointing that the governor vetoed this, and it's even more disappointing that a Republican from Johnson County flipped on us. Otherwise, we had the votes for a veto override, and we'll just see. But I worked very diligently on that. There's another piece of legislation too. It's across the governor's desk now. Hopefully she'll hear from people. It is Senate Bill 8. It has the property tax freeze that we passed for low-income seniors and disabled veterans last year. It would expand that program and more people would qualify. The governor has her veto pen out. Hopefully she will not veto this legislation. It is very important to help keep seniors and individuals in their homes. I appreciate you guys so much for being here and for all your support. I can't thank you enough. We worked very diligently for you guys, and I love working on the policy and solving problems, and that's what this is about, and that's what legislation is about. And if you hear about the fiscal note and how bad the fiscal note was, you guys keep in mind, $1 billion, by the end of the year, we'll have $1.6 billion in a rainy day fund, just sitting in the bank, collecting interest. The ending balance is anticipated to be over $1 billion. So we're looking at between $2.5 and $3 billion sitting in the bank and not being returned to the taxpayers. Think about that. And yes, we hear you loud and clear. So thank you for your patience and understanding. The audience, I'm sorry. For those of you online, you can't hear the ones talking in the room. We can hear them. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and open it up now for questions from folks that are here.
Hi, what is your view on the competitive advantage Kansas should be seeking in reference to our neighboring states? What should it be? Taxes, a good environment to live in, schools, and I also wonder, how do you feel with the recent ruling on transgender, how that is going to affect the advantage for Kansas?
I'll be glad to start with that. So if you look at the surrounding states and Kansas, we have more debt per capita than any of the surrounding states. We have higher taxes than most the surrounding states than us. Colorado tends to be lower in some aspects, but property tax, we're one of the higher ones. Nebraska's higher than us, but Missouri, Oklahoma, Colorado are all lower. Income tax, we're one of the higher states. It's really disappointing. In fact, if you look for seniors, and Kansas is one of the highest in the nation for taxing. That's why we were fighting so hard to get that Social Security income tax exempted. That would help move us in the right direction. And that's why we need that property tax freeze for seniors, for low-income seniors. It helps move us in the direction. We know the individuals that move out of state to retire. We need to do what we can to help individuals stay in this state and have access to the resources they need. We can do it better. We can do it smarter. The process is broken, I think, and we need to address that.
I would say that the form of government that we live under, the form of government that federal deals with federal and then state deals with state. When you're talking 10th Amendment and we're looking at the state, making sure that the people in the state are being represented, their values are being represented, their concerns are being addressed, is hard when we start realizing how that structure works to start comparing one state to another. There's a reason why it was designed that way. The reason it was designed that way was because if your values are upheld in the state that you choose to live in, then great, and that's wonderful. And then you have options of moving to other states that are moving in different directions or doing their own thing. That's part of the process. We do live in a representative government, and so when you vote for your representative or your senators, you are expecting them to go and represent you. Obviously, we went up as the representatives. We won the districts that we are in, and we went up to represent. And if we're not doing a good job, if we're not representing your values, then it is your obligation as a citizen of Kansas and as part of We the People to replace us with someone who does represent you. That's the job. And so if you feel that you are not being represented, I would encourage you to make sure that you are active in getting the representation that you want. So to compare Kansas with the states around us is a little bit disingenuous, because as a Kansan, you are voting to have a representative go to Topeka and work on your behalf. That being said, as far as how it translates to the transgender movement and the bills that were discussed and some that were passed, the representatives that were sent by the districts worked on behalf of their constituents. If that is something that you disagree with, then change your representatives.
I think the couple of things that really make Kansas attractive is just I think it's the fabric of who we are, is having the agriculture community combined with the city access as well, and having that balance. I think what Senator Tyson said about the taxes is one of the things we have as a disadvantage right now, and is something I was super disappointed on, that we never had that bill come back to us at the House level to override that veto, because there were other things in it that, even including property taxes, I keep hearing from my constituents, and especially from business owners too lately, about how they're receiving 70% property valuation increases, which is astronomically insane. No one's making that much more money that can cover those expenses and costs. Myself, I live in Douglas County. We just appealed our property tax because it's went up over $100,000 over the last year in my valuation, and we did not win our appeal. So our tax bill had the opportunity to do a state bid. It was a little bit, but it was something, and it did a lot of different things. So we're not as competitive as we need to be right now, and that's something I'd like to see change next year. I'd like for us to get that across the finish line, and I'd like to have the governor not veto all these things that would help Kansans, and I think that's a huge thing, is our pocketbooks. Something else that's really come up a lot lately, too, that I think is, Kansas has a lot of independence already when it comes to energy. We have a lot of our own resources here, and I've been doing a ton of research on this, and unfortunately, I wish I wasn't having to do this, but I've been researching all the different levels. So the federal level is called FERC. Kansas has the Kansas Corporation Commission, the KCC, and there's been a lot of limitations of our natural resources that we have here locally that have been just starting to shut down. They're purposely making us decrease the energy that we have available today. And what I call us, if we don't watch it and we don't really do this in a smart fashion, is that we're going to be the pincushion of the United States of America. And by that, I mean your cushion is going to be the solar fields that are going to take over all of the amazing agriculture land that we have available to us to produce. And then the pins are going to be the wind turbines placed everywhere. And I have been dealing this, so the legislation in last Friday. Unfortunately, this last week, I've been helping out the representative from Marshall County with her district being impacted by a wind turbine blade that broke. If you haven't experienced what that means, there's a lot of other implications that it entails, and I can talk about that further. But I would just say those are two things that are going to make Kansas not as competitive and attractive if we keep doing more of the wrong thing and not doing the right things. So that's what I would say.
Well, can you just elaborate more on the transgender issue? Do you think that that's going to make us less competitive for many individuals, and it's not an advantage to live here if you're transgender? Has that ever been taken into consideration when you pass these bills?
So transgenders have rights that we have too. However, we addressed, I forget the bill number off the top of my head now, it was the Women's Bill of Rights bill, where we defined what a biological male and what a biological female is. And in that bill, there were certain things that basically stated that, for example, restrooms. Restrooms are a big issue. We wouldn't have an issue of transgender if we did not have biological males with biological parts coming into a biological female space where things do happen that are not safe. And that is the only thing that's my main thing, I should say, that is the main risk that we have with that. No one's saying nobody can't be transgender. That still exists. You can do you, I can do me. And that still exists today.
Dennis George, health card question for 2024. Since the legislative session is over, no sign and die this year, so that's kind of exciting.
No, they had
No,
Signy
they didn't.
die, but they sprung it on us the last day.
I know, did it all at once.
Yeah.
So there's no coming back in May or in June or whenever. Looking at healthcare in Kansas, we have 53 hospitals that could be at risk for closing. We have 2 hospitals shutting down their emergency room to become rural emergency hospitals. I pay taxes to the federal government. Been in healthcare since 1983. We do have an opportunity to expand Medicaid because we've left $6.2 billion on the table. And looking at we are one of the last states to do it, even I think North Carolina did it this year. If we would expand it, that will help all hospitals. There's been a debate, and we can agree to disagree, but I'm passionate that I send taxes to the federal government. We've laid $6.2 billion on the table, and I've had my hospital friends starting to look at closure. So how can we provide you the information to get a yes vote? Because this actually helps the working people, 2-income families. This isn't helping poor. This is helping the lower middle class to survive today. So how can I get your vote to expand Medicaid?
So Medicaid expansion is an interesting issue. I call it what it is, expansion of Obamacare. People don't like to hear that, but that's what it is. And if Kansas would look at, and I've never said I'm against expansion, Kansas needs to look at an isolated, much like Utah and Oregon, a few other states did. Instead of just saying, let's blanket expand, let's look at targeted solutions instead of for those in need. That's what we should do. But the problem is with Medicaid, the hospital's closing, and I've experienced this with my Senate district and what used to be the House district that I represented, Fort Scott Hospital. They talk about the closing and how Medicaid expansion would save it, but if you talk to any of the professionals down there that were involved with that hospital, that was not the issue. And these other hospitals that are closing, the issue is people are not using their local hospitals. And a prime example is Allen County was floundering big time. Anderson County thriving, absolutely thriving. Well, what was the difference? The difference was who was managing the hospitals. As soon as Allen County went in under the same management as Anderson County, Allen County is thriving now also. People are using the local hospitals. That is a majority of the issue. My father always told me, buy local, stay local. When you can, you do, and that's what supports the hospitals. I know Senator Moran has worked on language to allow veterans to use their local hospitals, and that has helped. To me, it needs to be even more aggressive so that they don't have to travel. They can use the local facilities. That's what's going to save our local hospitals, is local use of the hospitals.
I would say that instead of just a blanket Medicaid expansion, I would prefer if we start looking at what is actually hindering our local hospitals. I would prefer if we start looking at things that actually affect or could affect real change very quickly for everyone and not just for the lower middle class. I would love to see some actual reform in how insurance companies work and how they determine what they're going to pay and what they're not going to pay and when they're going to pay and who they're going to pay. I would love to see an a la carte type list. That way you could comparatively shop for what you need to have done at certain hospitals. I would love to see people be given the option to look around and determine where their money is best spent, and for us to allow those people to keep more of their money from their paychecks so that they can determine where their money is best spent. I am not a proponent of giving your hard-earned money to another entity so that they can determine what care you receive. I don't agree with that. I don't appreciate that. I think that the individual should be able to talk to their healthcare provider, and they should be able to shop around and have affordable cost that is within access for them.
And just to agree, with Senator Tyson, there's a little bit I would say I probably disagree on just because of the location I think is going to matter. But everything else I would say with both of them, what they said is I would agree with. And then to expand on that, I don't believe in socialized medicine in general. I think that would be headed in the wrong direction. When it comes to hospitals, though, specifically, if you're talking about extremely rural hospitals, it's really hard for a small hospital who has not the same volume that a city has to be all things to everyone and do a good job. Healthcare is about quality as well as price. I'm in the insurance business as well. I'm in the innovative healthcare business doing things outside of insurance. And so what Rebecca talked a lot about is transparency and having access to know what does a bundle case rate look like for a surgery and a procedure. Oklahoma Surgery Center is a perfect example in Oklahoma that offers transparent prices. A lot of people actually do travel to there because they post their price. You know exactly what it's going to cost you for a total knee replacement because it's a bundle case rate and includes everything from the exam to the implant to the physician to the facility to the anesthesia, everything. It's one rate and it's guaranteed. And that's the business I also play in as well. Hospitals have a very hard time of doing that, of knowing their rates and knowing their true costs, and that's an issue. So this is such a complex and multi-layered issue that exists that it's just not solved. I feel like that would be a Band-Aid to a problem that has a lot of underlying layers and to peel back to the problem too.
And I want to let you know too, Fort Scott Hospital, one of the major employees in Fort Scott was literally paying bonuses for the locals not to use that hospital, for them to go elsewhere. So that was the beginning of the demise. That, it does make a difference if the locals use the hospital.
Well, and to be quite direct, local ownership and local control is what really makes hospitals work.
It does.
Because I will respectfully disagree with Fort Scott. That was run by the Mercy Hospital System out of St. Louis, who also closed Independence because there was not enough referrals going back to the mother house. That hospital in Fort Scott was going to survive, but they were getting allocated overhead over $1 million, and the mother house of Mercy did not want to sell to anybody. And again, I've been in the
Understand.
business for 30 years.
I understand.
Debate, or is this a question?
Yeah. I understand. We can agree to disagree on that. I do know what happened in Fort Scott. I have friends. I was watching that hospital for many years. When you are literally paying bonuses for people to go elsewhere, they were not using the local hospital.
Hi, I'm Sean Wilson, and I would like to know, with the recent issues that have been coming out all over the news about our foster care system. And I have been reaching out to all of you repeatedly with photos and documents on what we need to help these children not be the victims of the laws in Kansas. I have 2 children that recently went through this system. And Carolyn, Carrie, you guys got emails. I've never heard back from
I
any
didn't
of
get
you.
your email.
I
But-
respond to emails, so I would
I
like to
didn't
know
get
your
your
email
email.
address afterwards.
Started emailing since last January of 2022,
I-
so that we could possibly stop children from dying in Kansas in our systems. And I would like to know,
So, Ms. Wilson, I never got your emails. I would get your contact information after. The foster care system is broken. It is
My-
broken in
yes,
Kansas.
and my question
and we-
is who of you guys are going to support us after all the things that have come out on the news? Because what we're doing is not for the children. What we're doing is not what's in the best interest of the children, but what's in the best interest of keeping them in the system so people are getting paid. I've recently found out how much money is going into the system and how long it takes for somebody to get a child out of the system if they don't have a support system like I am. If they don't have somebody backing them, it takes anywhere up to 3 and 4 years to get a child out of this system. And in the meantime, our people are getting paid at the courthouses to cancel hearings repeatedly, because they're making a monthly check as long as that child is in the system and has to appear in court. So my question is, which of you guys can help or willing to step up and help to make notable changes for today's children to keep them from being these kids? This is Xavier. He is 4 years old. And this one is Aspen. She's 7. And they live here in Ottawa. And they went through a 14-month nightmare. And I promise you, they only went through it for 14 months because we got vocal. We stopped being railroaded by our system and started jumping up and down and screaming. And we got them out of this system, but not without consequences. They are both damaged and hopefully will recover without any wounds down the road because they are young.
I appreciate you being here. I do have researchers actually researching. When we were still in session, they were researching what the laws right now look like and what we can do to start addressing your concerns. Because I appreciated the conversation that I had with you, and now that session is over, I was very excited that we are going to be able to sit down and start looking at the things where kids are falling through the cracks, because it happens. In the system of structure that we have in foster care, there are some outstanding people, and then there are some that aren't. And it's just the same as anywhere else. And so the fact that we have kids that are falling through the cracks, the fact that we do have families that are disadvantaged and that are having to fight the system, that's a problem. And these kinds of problems, they are fixable. There are ways to address it, and I am very excited, and our researchers that we have and our revisers at the Capitol are second to none. They're amazing, and we will address these issues. These are human beings. They need to be treated with the basic dignity that they deserve. These kids didn't ask to be put in the system. They are incidental from choices that other people have made. And so protecting those who cannot protect themselves is vital, and we should all be on board with that.
So thank you for being here. I appreciate it very much. Let me tell you, this system has been broken for many years, not just overnight. And with this administration, it has actually gotten worse. We heard debate on the Senate floor how children are in offices overnight. That had never happened prior to this administration. It is not a priority, and it needs to be. In fact, it was so disheartening that one of the senators that a couple years ago, we passed legislation to form an oversight committee for foster care. The legislature is part-time, the reality of it. The oversight committee was to look at the program and propose improvements and implement. So that was attempted. One of my good friends was appointed to that committee. She fights diligently for this issue. She resigned on the Senate floor from that committee because she felt her voice wasn't being heard. I hope that she reconsiders, because she is one of the strongest advocates and understands this system better than most. We absolutely need to address the process. It is broken. And you're right, money has been made a priority in that system, and that is not what should be going on. I know that they've looked at the contractors, they've looked at other items. We did have legislation this year again. The senator that resigned felt that it was a Band-Aid. It wasn't a fix to the problem. So I don't know who's going to be appointed to that committee, but there is another oversight committee just for foster care. And hopefully with the research that's being done, we will be able to find solutions. But I would highly encourage you to contact the administration also, because they are the ones that governing it. I'll tell you guys a real quick personal story. A friend reached out to me, not in this area. They knew I was a legislator. They could not get the kids into the foster care system. The mother was suicidal, 90 miles an hour, a gun in the vehicle. I mean, just several instances. And foster care would not come and get those children out of harm's way. So it's broken both ways, not just taking children that shouldn't be in, but also the other way too. So
I do realize that, but it's not just our laws with the agencies that handle them. It's the laws and the policies that give our court systems the right to keep stalling the children, the prosecutors, the lawyers, the judge, the magistrate, not a judge, a magistrate, that continues to cancel court over nothing and never gets down to where we are, because they have the policies on their side to keep this just dragging and trudging along without moving in a child's time, right? And we're looking at adults' time, not the time of the child. So when a child is trying to be placed back home by a system, we have our court systems refusing to work with the systems we put in place because they have the power to. That's what I'm upset about, is that these children didn't have to go through this. They could have gone home pretty rapidly and couldn't because of the policies that give the power to somebody else.
I want to say thank you for sharing this. And I apologize if you sent the email. I did not see this email from you. And I wanted your email address so that I could search it and see if I could find it. And if not, see where it's at, if it's in spam or something like that. We do get a lot of emails. So this is an important topic to me. Before we even went into office, Majority Leader Chris Croft he's been hosting calls since last year. And this topic has been a topic on multiple calls. To the extent that even I have pulled in people that I know that have folks that, there's problems at multiple layers. Again, there's court system's an issue. There's an issue with even sometimes what the parent who takes these children in has to go through. There was an issue with a kid in Gardner last year that probably should be with that family, and that kid is not. The kid is now with a brand new family who's never seen, yeah. The issues are across the board. The court system actually hasn't come up as much. So I appreciate you sharing that, and definitely wrote the notes on that down as well as to what we can do to help in that area. This is emotional for me. I don't have kids that are adopted. I don't have kids in the foster system. I've never been a foster parent, even though when I looked at kids, I saw a family of 5 one time, and I was like, oh, I would love to adopt those children. They just seemed amazing kids. They shouldn't have to go through evil people, and sometimes that's part of the problem too. And how do we solve that? My committee is not one that was able to solve the problem here because I wasn't in the committee that deals with the children and families. But we do have KDADS, which is the Kansas Department of Aging and Disabilities, and they deal with the Department of Children and Families. And they did talk about how they're going to be going through an RFP process because another layer are these agencies, and they have 4 of them that they contract with and keeping people and managing it, and the amount of caseworkers that are involved sometimes is astronomical, and it's just not okay how that happens. And there are things that happen that just you can't change, but we can try to put measures in place. One of the questions that I asked, because they talked about performance measurements, and my thing is not performance measurements in a contract, it's performance guarantees, so that there is actually true skin in the games and dollars in the game. So if they don't perform and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, which might be pushing those cases forward and working with the different parties to make sure that they are happening, that it's easy. It's either you're satisfied or you're not. And if you're not satisfied, there's things they have to do. And if they don't get paid the way they're supposed to get paid. And that usually creates a lot more action in a contract, because it just builds a lot more camaraderie, and there should be regular calls going on a regular basis because this is such an important issue. So appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and it is of high importance, I think, to all 3 of us here.
I also remember that when I was out campaigning this fall, I talked to a lady that was in the system, or was working in the system. She said it was, one of her concern was everything was privatized, and so these companies, like the one she was working for, have offices that are mainly housed in areas that are quite a ways from Franklin County. And as a result, we're also having trouble having people have enough homes here in our county. So a lot of these kids are housed clear down at Wichita or Pittsburgh or somewhere. And so she said she felt like the people that worked for the agency spent almost all their time shuffling kids back and forth between where they were housed and bringing them back here for court appearances, and they didn't have time to do the things that they really needed to do. So that is another concern.
I do know that part of that, in certain situations, is for the child's safety, depending on what the situation was that they were being taken out of. But the more that we can keep kids local to the familiar surroundings, the more that they can stay with a trusted family member, the more that they can stay within their comfort zone, the better off it is for these kids. And so it is a high priority. It is high importance that we look at this system and make the changes that need to be made while still protecting these kids and their families.
I would like the answer on that. No, we don't. We keep them in this community, but we don't let them be active and normal. We don't give them that privilege. So when Aspen was in the system, she was in soccer. She was spending nights with her classmates and going to birthday parties. And because she was in the system, she was not granted the permission to do that with these people because of the policies. So she was in her local area, but she was not able to be a 6 and 7-year-old child with her classmates because of what our policies forced us to do with her. So it's important to note that. And families aren't taking kids in anymore because we can't hardly tolerate the abuse that we go through watching the children. Let me give you an instance. Aspen is 7 years old, and she was put into a car repeatedly every weekend to make a 9-hour drive across the state and back with a stranger man that she's never met that pulled in our driveway to take her to a dad visit in central Kansas that lived in a halfway house for 1 hour supervised visit. She was 6 at the time.
Did that get reported? I mean, because that to me needs to be reported immediately and somebody needs to take action, so.
Our policies made that possible. Our policies put that child in a car every weekend to drive across the state of Kansas. Our policies made it where random people had to pick her up because we don't have enough transport. So my idea of trying to put my granddaughter in a car with a stranger was asinine. I'm supposed to be teaching her not to go with strangers, and I'm being forced to put her in this car, or I will have her taken out of my care for not complying, because that's what TFI and DCF made me do. Here's the thing. By the time 12 weeks had gone past and she'd made so many trips across the state of Kansas with random strangers, one day a man pulled in and she went off our dock and went into the middle of our pond because that was the only place she felt like they could not take her out of and put her in that car. At the time, she was 6, right? This is important for people to know that a 6-year-old felt her only way out of this forced situation was to go off into a pond so we couldn't get her, right? I mean, come on. I should not have to be standing here doing this, but I am. My kids are home and they're safe, healthy, and happy at this time. So this is my passion for you guys to fix it for other kids because it's time to stop the abuse on these children with the policies.
I agree with you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that has a question for this board?
Good morning.
Please.
My name is Olivia Kloster. I was actually given the opportunity to watch you guys on Tuesdays and Thursdays during this session. And I am more interested in hearing about what you guys are going to be doing during this break. Some projects that you guys are working on or what you guys have upcoming while you guys are not in session. Thank you.
I'll start off with that. I'm back to work at the bank. I literally, we ended session on Friday at like 9:30, 10 o'clock. I was back at the bank working my daily normal job Monday morning at 8 o'clock. We are a part-time legislature. I am a full-time employee. If I am at the State House, the bank doesn't pay me. If I'm at the bank, the State House doesn't pay me. And so my job takes priority. My kids, I still have kids at home and they like to eat. I can't seem to break them of the habit, and they really like to eat 3 times a day. So that's that. In my off time, not only do I make sure that I am still checking my emails, not only am I still checking up on research and things like that, not only am I still working in the avenue of individual liberty and Second Amendment rights, I work at the bank, and then I go and I speak to folks like you guys that show up and want updates and want to have your voice heard. Granted, when we're not at the State House, we don't get paid to do it, but it is part of the job. All of us are here on our own time and on our own dime today. We're not getting paid by the state to be here. That's not why we do this. Why we do this is because it's important to each and every one of us to be able to represent our communities the best we can. And so these are the things that I do. But Monday through Friday, you can find me at the bank.
I love that you used the word break. I don't think I've had a break in quite a while. We are a part-time legislature. I'm in software IT, so I manage projects and have quite a few going right now. But also, we have interim committees. We'll be working on topics. Foster care, I know, will be one. I'll be visiting with the Senate President and asking, the appointment, who that's going to be, and what the intention are. Also, tax issues. You guys may not be aware, but the Senate was able to pass a constitutional amendment that would cap valuation increases at 4% a year on your property tax. It doesn't do any harm. It doesn't take us out of compliance with fair market value. 2 states are already doing it, Oklahoma, Oregon, actually several states are doing it. But I modeled the language after those 2 states. They've had it in place for over 25 years. Property taxes are literally putting people out of their homes. We had a undersheriff from Lynn County was speaking in Miami County about a month ago, and he was telling of all the people that is removing out of their homes. So hopefully the governor will sign or let Senate Bill 8 become law. She could let it become law without a signature. It is critical to keep people in their homes. There's other issues in the bill, I understand that, but a key one is helping people keep their homes. I'll be working on other tax policy legislation, researching, and also I just do a lot of research. I finished last night at 10:45. My husband can attest to this with a phone call from constituents. I mean, we work at this constantly. We don't have staff except during session for approximately 80 to 90 days. We do have assistants that help us with the phone calls and the scheduling. Now we're on our own, which is fine. I am not complaining. I love my job. I love all of my jobs, the ranch included, even though I'm the gopher on the ranch. But, we just, what I like this time of year is we're out among people. I ran into a guy on New Year's Eve. We were here getting groceries in Ottawa, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, we have to eat too." So, but that's when you hear from people. You know your constituents, and you know who you're representing.
So on my break also, which I don't have a break either, I am a full-time employee of a company. I've got a benefits consulting job and I'm a sales professional. So I have to pay the bills. Working for the legislature is not going to pay all my bills. So I have a family and I take care of them as well as work. I will not get paid for doing everything I'm doing right now for the legislature. I've spent quite a bit of time this week. I've got calls scheduled next week to figure out some of these things. We're collaborating on what's going on in energy. I'll be collaborating on some of the healthcare issues, on some of the bills that I want to work on for this coming session. I have a meeting coming up here in a few weeks with a superintendent of school. I have about 6 schools in my district. So there's a lot of things that we're doing and calls that we get and things that people we're talking to. So a lot of collaboration. I've got a huge network of people that are across the state that I have met that has been really incredible. And so I'm leveraging those people who are really connected to the issues in the communities and working with them because they're reaching out, they're advocates and they're go-getters, and they're people that can help me with accomplishing what I need to accomplish as well to come back and work for you all, because there's a lot of people I talk to and their heads in the sand on things. They live in a bubble and they just want to live their life. And that's how I used to be too. I just want to live my life. But then when people started taking those things away, that's when I got involved. and it's different for all of us. So that's a little bit about what I'll be doing. I have to say, I have loved being a legislature. I have not loved the politics within the politics, though, and some of the icky things that I see happen. But outside of that, I love this job. And so thank you for, electing us to do it.
We have time for one more question.
I'm Judy Davis Cole, and I think that most of you recognize me. I represent the age group on the other end of the spectrum. Two of those bills, Social Security, income taxes, and food, very important to AARP and our constituents. The issue I have is, and many people have, is I can't believe that you all think, I know that you don't, think that throwing everything into a big omnibus bill at the end of session for you all to debate it 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning to make a decision is the best way to legislate. This has been going on session after session. It's not your fault. What can be done about that?
So I love that question. And what can be done, and I'm keeping a list, and other legislators need to too. Next year, when hopefully we're reelected, we vote on the rules. We vote on the rules of the chamber, and we can put legislation in. Because right now, you're supposed to only put 5 bills in, except for tax. Tax is exempt. Well, leadership, you saw what they did. They gave us 3 bills and then asked us to get how many pieces of legislation passed. So yes, it is not a good process. But I'm hoping AARP engages with Senate Bill 8. We need it this year. But we can change the rules. We can change the process. The process is broken for legislation, and we can be very vocal with leadership. Even some of us may run for leadership. You guys have never, that I was not interested. I think that I'm very effective as a policymaker, especially tax. I do know my skill set. I'm a very good manager. But we need to make sure that our leadership understands that this is no longer acceptable, and we will not stand for this process to be broken anymore.
I appreciate the question. I agree with you. I think that trying to cram so much into to either the omnibus or any bill like that is really detrimental to the bills themselves, and it's detrimental to our communication with our constituents, because there are times when some of these things get bundled that you have no choice. You have to support one of the pieces of the legislation even when another piece is absolutely goes against everything else that you believe in. I hate that process. I want to be part of the reason why we stop using that process. I have had this conversation with a number of legislators, whether it's representatives or senators. Most of us, I would say a good 90% of us, want this process that we are in right now to be fixed. We need to start focusing on policy by policy. We need to focus bill by bill, and we need to stop trying to cram so many things together, especially when they don't really pertain to one another. The fact that we have this process right now, that we came into, that Representative Barth and I came into this process when it is so commonly used, so widely known, doesn't mean that we don't have a voice in order to start to fix it. But we do need constituents to reach out to the leadership teams on both sides, both chambers, and tell them that you want the transparency of not bundling these bills. You want us to work these bills, and you want your priorities to be moved through the system. You want them to have the hearings when they should have the hearings. You want the chairman of the committees to be responsible and to be accountable for what they hear and what they choose not to hear. We need our constituents to speak up. We need you guys to not just come to us, but also to be contacting the leadership teams. And they're probably going to hate that I say that so many times, but it is the case. We don't get to just go up and stomp our feet and get what we want. That's not the way it works. You have to have everybody on the same page, moving in the same direction. And I think that the majority of your legislators are on the same page with you. We want to be able to look at something and take it for what it's worth, as opposed to trying to look at a conglomeration of nonsense that we're having to pick out pieces that we're proud to come and talk to our constituents about, while trying to gloss over things that maybe we didn't like so much. That's not how the process was designed to work, and I, for one, want to see those changes. And I appreciate all of you guys being involved in that. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that you guys are the ones that show up, and you guys are the ones that contact, and you guys are the ones that get involved. Talk to your friends, talk to your sphere of influence, and make sure that they understand how important it is to also be engaged.
I think it's also going to take a group of us as legislators taking a stand and saying to leadership and the chairs, here's what we want. So with the rules, like Senator Tyson mentioned, I have a list of things I want to change in the rules for the coming election, but it's going to be the way it is this coming year, so we've got to take a stand. I think there's like 31, 32, 33, something like that, total new freshman legislators. Of that number, there are 25 of us that are Republicans. And so there's a couple, I would say, that are probably not as conservative, let's say, who will probably veer a little bit differently in that group. But in general, I think a lot of us are very fiscally conservative who do not like these omnibus bills, who do not like things put in there together. We want to have more of a say of what bills have a hearing. Right now, it's the chairs who make that decision, and we can give all the input and feedback we want, but we literally do not have the power to make them do it. The kicking and screaming and stomping our feet nothing will work on that. So constituents is where that's made a bigger difference, and I'm talking about, their constituents as well as across the entire state, letting them know, let your voices being heard, and making sure leadership knows. I think some of the bills that we heard at the last minute, I would have loved for them to go through the right process. They did not, but the fact we got to hear them was because we the people spoke and said we want these bills to have an opportunity. So I will do what I can to try to help that process be better in the future, because we agree.
Thank you so much. It is time to wrap this up for today. We want to thank Senator Tyson, Representative Schmoy, and Representative Barth for representing their constituents this year and taking the time from their busy schedules to meet with us for these legislative coffees. And thank you all for being here and supporting what's going on in our community. I hope that you will continue to do that as we start the next legislative coffees next year in January. Everyone have a rewarding and relaxing